Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be performing an oil change on this 2017 Volkswagen Golf GTI with a 2.0 liter turbo engine. But, well, wait a minute, not we. My daughter is going to be performing the oil change, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's show you the supplies necessary to perform the oil change and the tools necessary, which we have gotten some tools that are going to be helpful in this particular case on this vehicle. So after the intro and information disclaimer, let's start checking them out. Please review the automotive information, repair, and modification guidelines on this screen. Seek the advice of a repair professional if you're unsure how to perform any repair or modification safely and correctly. All repairs and modifications are performed at your own risk. We're now taking a look at the supplies necessary for the oil change on this 2017 Golf GTI Mark 7. And the main supplies here are, of course, the oil and oil filter and drain plug replacement for it. But, of course, you have a variety of other things you need to complete the oil change successfully. First thing is always safety. So we have a pair of safety glasses that the person performing this will be wearing, some gloves that they'll be wearing as well. And then eventually, if we need to clean up anything, we'll be using some California compliant brake clean to clean up any excess oil that might be remaining on like the drain plug area and such. We have a kit from BMP Tuning for this particular oil change using liquid moly, which complies with the VW oil specification for the engine, which again is the 2 liter, 220 horsepower turbo engine in this vehicle. And so we get a 5 liter jug here. We also get a 1 liter jug. The capacity specification is 5.7 liters total. So it will use all of this and a portion of the small container there. In the oil filter box here, we of course get the oil filter, cartridge filter, and then we get the O-ring that we'll be putting on as a replacement on the canister for the oil filter. And they also shipped a brand new drain plug with a, of course, new O-ring on that. We'll be replacing the one that's on the oil pan right now. And with that, we have the tools necessary on the table then to perform the oil change. To remove the cap over the oil filter, you need a 32 millimeter socket. So I purchased actually a set of these, which contain this 32 millimeter 3/8 inch drive socket for that. And then also the drain plug, which we'll pull back out here and show you in a moment here. There's a special tool from VW that fits purposely in the drain plug here. You can use a flat blade screwdriver, but it's meant for a tool like this. You can get it in a socket form or this hand tool, which you insert it into the drain plug to like that, and then you can use that to remove and insert it back into the oil pan. So we'll be using that tool. And then, of course, we need a funnel to make sure we pour the new oil back into the engine without spilling it anywhere. We have some paper towels in case we spill anything and need to sop that up. And then also, in the case of the oil filter cap, the canister that it's in, we're going to use a microfiber towel to clean up anything around that to make sure that we're not introducing any lint or any dirt into the engine. So those are the items necessary to perform this oil change. And if I hadn't mentioned already the O-ring, we're going to use some new fresh oil on this to lubricate the O-ring when we put it onto the oil filter canister. And also for the O-ring on the drain pan, I like to use fresh oil just to make sure that there's any contaminants in the existing oil, which hopefully there isn't that much, but I'd rather use fresh oil for that to make sure that these will install successfully without being dry, and they can sometimes bind if there's no lubricant on them. So just a little bit on both of these to make sure that they install correctly. And the other thing we're going to do a little bit different is I'm going to use this, or the person performing this will be using this oil marker pen to put a little mark on the oil filter canister cover and in the base of it, just to mark where it is in its fully tight position now, so that we don't, we have a reference point, so when the new one's in, or the canister's put it back in place, we can tighten it to that same area and it should be tight. So we have a reference points to start from where it is now. So with that, we're going to start prepping for the oil change on the top side of the engine. So let's move to that now. Here we are on the top side of the engine, and I have my daughter Alicia here. She's the owner of the vehicle, and she'll be performing the oil change.
Hi guys, thanks for watching.
And in view now, of course, we have the top side of the engine. We're going to be removing the engine cover on the top, which will give us additional access to the oil filter canister cover. And then we'll also be opening the oil fill plug and the drain, the dipstick to allow air to go down into the engine, so that when we remove the drain plug, you'll have a chance to drain out a little bit quicker because air is allowed to go in from the top side of the engine. So let's get going on removing the engine cover on the top. And set that off to the side in a safe spot. All right, now we're going to perform a step that most videos don't seem to list, but I'm going to suggest doing it. The torquing of the oil filter canister cover is usually a question. It's plastic, so you don't want to get too aggressive with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this white oil pen and we're going to mark the bottom lip of the cover and also the metal, just so we have an alignment point so we know where it should end up, because it's properly torqued at this point in time. So we should be able to reproduce that result once we put it back together. And now we'll go ahead and remove the oil filler cap and place that off to the side with the bottom side flipped up so that we don't drain any oil anywhere. And we'll yank out the dipstick just a little bit to let some air go through there as well. So we're now at the point where we're ready to move to the bottom side and remove the drain plug. Some drain oil changes will have you pull the filter canister at this point, but there could potentially be oil in it right now. I'd rather let the oil drain out, and then we'll remove it in the next step after we're done on the bottom side. So with that, let's move underneath the car. We're now underneath the car and we're at the location for the drain plug on this 2-liter engine. And this is a plastic drain plug, and it has a little tab that holds it in position into the plastic oil pan. So at the very bottom there is where the notch is on the oil pan for that little tab on the drain plug. So we're going to use the specialty tool to insert into the slot, which in this case you could use a flat blade screwdriver if you didn't have the tool like this. So you'll turn it counterclockwise and then make sure you have your pan in the proper position. The oil will begin to shoot back towards the rear of the vehicle. And make sure that you are ready to pull that off to the side and you have gloves and protective eyewear on. And then I have some paper towels up there that you can use to put the drain plug on so we don't drop the oil everywhere. And we want to monitor the oil just initially as it's draining out here to make sure that the drain pan is positioned correctly, and it seems to be doing quite fine. We're now going to prep the O-ring on the new drain plug. As I stated in the earlier part of the video, I prefer to use fresh oil for this particular function. Some will say just use the used oil. I just rather make sure it's clean oil and we're not introducing any contaminants. So my daughter's going to open up this 1-liter container and with her gloves go and dip her finger in to get a little bit of oil. And just run it along the O-ring so it is lubricated, so that when we insert it into the drain pan, it's ready to go in without binding on the O-ring. And with that, let's move back down to the bottom side of the engine because the draining has completed and we're ready for the new drain plug. We're now at the point where the oil flow is depleted down to drips. So we're going to clean out the drain plug hole and make sure it's as clean as possible before we insert the pre-lubricated O-ring and the new drain plug. It will continue to drip just a hair. All right, we're now going to begin threading the drain plug in by hand because with the tool on it, it was hitting part of the bottom of the engine here. And now that it's basically seated, now we can insert the tool. and wait, turn it until it gets to that notch where it snaps into place. And it has gotten to that position. Now let's clean up the residual oil there. And if need be, we can use some brake clean on it to clean it up. It's important to make sure that this becomes or is clean when you're done, so that when you fill the engine and do your test drive, you can verify that there's no leaks introduced by the new drain plug or the O-ring that's on it. So with that, we're ready to go to the top side and remove the oil filter and insert the new oil filter and get the engine oil back into the engine. We're back on the top side of the engine, and we're about to remove the oil filter cap or canister cover. And you want to make sure that you inspect around the base of it, make sure there's no pieces of dirt or anything that's been, from your driving of the vehicle that has been placed at that. Make sure it's clean. And if it is, you can go ahead. If not, you clean it. But if it's clean, let's go ahead and remove it. Use the 32mm socket and twist that, and it should be fairly easy to twist off. Again, it's plastic, so you don't want to get too aggressive with it, be it removing it or installing it. But just in case there's any residual oil, we want to be ready with a rag from making sure we don't spill anything outside of if the cap's still got some on it or the filters does. So once it's loose from the threads, pull it up just a hair, let the air get in there, and let any drain. And as long as it looks reasonably clean, you can pull it up. So at this point, my daughter will grab the filter, and it should take a little bit of wiggling to get it removed from its installed position. And there we go. And let's put that into a container that won't leak. All right. And we're going to now move on to the removal and replacement of the O-ring on the cover. So we may need a flat blade screwdriver to perform that task. It should be, use gentle force. Yes, that right there. And then get that to loop up and go off the end. Make sure you don't, again, very light force. It's very easy to move the O-ring, but you have to get it over that lip to get it. Now we're going to clean the threads in that location where the O-ring was located with the microfiber towel. This is to remove any dirt that is present on it. May be there. It should be just oil at this point, but we just want to make sure it's as clean as possible. And now that my daughter has some potential dirt on her glove, I'm going to lubricate the O-ring for her, so we don't have to stop her from doing what she's doing at the moment. So just get a little bit of new oil and put it on the O-ring to loop it up. This is so that when you install the cover, when the O-ring seats into its groove, it's not dry rubber against the plastic or the metal of the vehicle. So your oil change kit should include the new O-ring with the oil filter. If it doesn't, you potentially could reuse it, but I would suggest that you replace it with each oil change. So now we're going to insert the oil filter into the canister here, and it should drop in here and basically snap into place. There should be a little bit of pressure, and then it should just pop into place. as it did right there. So now let's make sure you inspect the opening where the cover came out, make sure you didn't have anything drop in there, and it looks reasonably clean, just some used oil still in there. You can't really get all of that out, but now that we've got the canister cover prepped with a new O-ring, we have the new filter in place, we've left the plastic centerpiece in place where it was, and now we're just going to drop this in and then begin to engage the threads on the canister cover. Make sure that they engage easily. It should spin easily. And then when you get down to the bottom, you'll need to use the socket again. And when we get to when it seats at the bottom, we should be able to see our alignment marks line up. And then we'll know we're at the fully installed type position.
The mark
Yep,
is just
and-
off from where it was.
So now we have the drain plug in place on the bottom side. We have the oil filter changed and the new O-ring in the canister cover. And we're now ready to start filling the engine with oil. So let's get a funnel to help in the aiming, whichever one's the appropriate size for the opening here. Let's find a good funnel for that. We're going to pour in the 5 liters. This engine calls for 5.7 liters, but we're going to consume the full contents of this particular package. We now have the 5-liter container opened. This particular one has a nozzle that pulls out from the main part of the container, and then it has a plug in the center part you have to pull out. So we're in that state. So you might want to keep in mind that you want to pour not with that on the bottom, but more on the side or top, depending on how you can support the weight. All right, we have 5 liters of oil in the engine now, and we, in theory, could drop it off or drive it off the ramps, not drop it off, but drive it off the ramps and then check the oil level. You want to make sure that you get it into the proper fill range. Right now, the oil filter is dry, so the level is going to be a little misleading because there's no oil up in that section of the engine. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the filler cap back in place. And we're going to pull the dipstick and clean it off, put it back in and check it to see what the level is, just to see that we should see something on the dipstick at this point to know that we're at least able to start it. And with the dipstick reinserted, and then we'll pull it back out. Make sure it's all the way down when you... And then we'll look for this recessed area. And we actually have oil in the recessed area right now, which would imply that we're full, but given that we're at an angle and the oil filter hasn't been filled with any oil, we know that that's a false reading at this point, but at least we have enough engine oil in place to safely start the engine. So let's go ahead and move that cover off the vehicle. We'll go ahead and start the engine up. We'll drop the car off the ramps here to get it on a level surface and let it run for a little bit. And then we'll check the engine oil level again. If everything looks good, we'll go ahead and take it on a short test drive. And the reason for the test drive is to make sure that all components are exposed to all the oil pressures that the oil pump and the system are exposed to. Mainly that the O-ring up here is exposed to all the proper pressures and that it doesn't leak. Because a lot of videos will just stop saying, oh, you're done, you got your oil in there, you check the level, and you're done. The last part of the job is the verification that you've not introduced any new problems, and then, of course, clean up afterwards. So let's get car off the ramps and check out the oil level after we start it up. We're taking a look at the initial startup here while we're on the ramp still, just to make sure that we haven't observed any leakage out of the oil filter canister here. Looks good so far. So next step is we're going to remove the wheel chocks and then back the car down off the ramp to get it on a level surface. We'll stop the engine and we'll let it drain down for a couple of minutes just to make sure all the oil is down on the bottom end as much as possible. Check the oil level. If things are good, then we'll do the test drive and confirm we have no leaks. We now have the vehicle off the ramps and on a level surface, so we're going to check the oil level, and we probably will find it's lower than it was even up on the ramps at an angle. And this is because the engine's been running, it sent the oil up into the oil filters, which is going to absorb some of it, plus it's going to be in its normal location up in that canister for the oil filter. So let's go ahead and take a look at the oil dipstick. And the min is here, max is here, and we're right about here. So yeah, we definitely need a little bit more oil in there, probably 3/8 to half a quart necessary in here. So it's best to pour in a little bit at a time and then check it. And if you can always add more, it's a lot easier to add than it is to remove. You probably want to dry it and put it back in because the level may have been fluctuated by the fact the oil is draining in.
I mean, look full. Me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, we'll do one more check of that once the test drive is done. But right now, we're safe to go on a test drive. We'll put that oil filler cap back in. And your assistant will help you. We can leave the engine cover off for the moment. We'll reinsert it once we're completely done. So with that, it's going on a test drive. We're back from our spirited test drive, and we're going to check the engine oil level. We've had it sitting for a couple moments here, and making sure we're still showing a full level on the dipstick. Yeah, looks like it's maybe one crosshair at the very top not covered. That's basically full. So we've confirmed the oil level is good, and the oil canister filter cartridge cover is all dry. We've inspected that, taken a flashlight and looked around the base of it, and it's all dry. So the only thing left as far as inspections are on the bottom end. But first, before we get done here, let's go ahead and take the engine cover and pop that back on, since we are done on the top end. Getting the 4 mount points together at the same time can be a little challenging, and that's back on. All right, so the next thing is we're going to get it back up on the ramps and take a look at the drain plug. We're on the bottom side of the car at this point after the test drive. We've checked the top end for any leaks and we haven't found any. We're now checking the drain plug to make sure that it's nice and dry, and from all inspections here it appears that it is, and this should probably be checked again in a few hundred miles just to make sure there's no seepage out of here. At this point, we've confirmed the oil level in the engine. We've confirmed that there's no leak up at the oil filter at the canister cover for it, and this drain plug here looks dry. And the cover is back in place. The only thing we have left is the cleanup. So let's switch over to that, and then we'll be done. We're about to reset the oil service reminder. Okay. And then this vehicle is at the 20,000 mark, so the inspection now prompt is there as well. We're at the point of cleaning up after the oil change, and the proper cleanup is always an important step of any job. So we have the oil filter cartridge here that needs to be disposed of properly. You cannot dispose of this in the garbage in California, and I would imagine in many communities throughout the country. So you want to collect this in a appropriate bag that can hold it until you can take it to a household hazardous waste program collection site, or potentially your garbage collection company might do that for you as well. So find where in your area that you might have such a program taking place. Most auto parts stores don't take the oil filter, so make sure you find the right place for that. And with the oil itself, most auto parts stores will accept used oil for the recycling program in that area. So I'm going to transfer the oil from the drain pan that we have here into another container that will allow us to transfer it safely over to a collection facility. And it might be, like I said, an auto parts store, or the waste company does have collection programs in the area for household hazardous waste. And I usually go there to take it. They'll be very helpful in draining them out and handing the containers back to you very quickly. So find out what's appropriate in your environment.
If you like this video, smash that like button. If you're stopping by the channel for the first time, please subscribe to the channel. Click that bell icon to get notified when I upload new videos. Please follow Retro Car Guy 530 on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for taking the time to visit the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.